In this video, let us look at agglutination reactions. In the earlier video on precipitation reaction, we have seen the principle, and the same principle is applicable in the case of agglutination reaction also. Then you will see a visible clump being formed at the zone of equivalence, which means if the antibody is higher or the antigen is higher concentration, it cannot give a visible precipitate. Only at the zone of equivalence it will give a visible precipitate. There are several advantages of an agglutination reaction. First of all, the biggest advantage is it is very sensitive. This test is very sensitive, and this test will give a visible precipitate. It will give a very visible precipitate maybe in 1 day or in 2 days period. So longer incubation period is required. And the third biggest advantage is it is applicable for many proteins. So these are some of the biggest advantages of agglutination reaction. Let us look at what are some of the conditions, conditions for agglutination reaction. In an agglutination reaction to be carried out, first of all, if the antigen must be a particulate antigen. Particulate antigen means it has to be a particle, which means it can be a microorganism. Then only agglutination reaction is possible. And the second condition is there must be at least 2 or more particulate antigens present, or antigenic determinants must be present. That results into multiple copies. Multiple copies of the antigen or the particulate matter must be present. Then only you will get a visible clump. And the third condition is if the antibody must be multivalent. Antibody must be multivalent. You know now that a very good antibody for agglutination reaction will be IgM molecule because it is multivalent. And these are capable of giving rise to agglutination reaction. Understand, from based on this, if there are bacteria, what will happen in this case is the bacteria are linked by, there has to be more than one antigenic determinant. And another fourth condition is if the antigenic determinant should be expressed on the surface. Expressed on surface. So therefore these antigenic determinants are expressed on the surface. What will happen now? Multivalent antibodies, they will combine. Okay, it is a multivalent. For example, this is a multivalent. It is combining, and this kind of a lattice is formed. And this lattice, you can see that it has got very high molecular weight. And this high molecular weight will precipitate in solutions, or it will precipitate in a gel. That's why agglutination reactions are highly sensitive, very reliable. There are two kinds of agglutination reactions. The two kinds of agglutination reactions are, the first one is called agglutination reactions. The first is called direct agglutination reactions. Direct. And the second is called indirect agglutination reactions. These are the two kinds of agglutination reactions. What is happening in direct agglutination reaction? Classic example is the blood group typing. Blood grouping. We have carried out these blood grouping experiments where you know that on a microscopic slide, when we take blood, that will have an antigen present in the blood group antigens. Assume this is a blood group antigen A. Now the antibody against this blood group antigen A, that is the anti-A, when we add, the anti-A is added, a reaction occurs. This kind of a visible clump is formed. A visible clump, a visible agglutinin is formed. This is what we call direct agglutination reaction. Simple test which is carried out on a slide. It is called the slide agglutination. Another important agglutination reaction which I think all of us must know is which is called the Vidal test. Vidal test. There are two direct agglutination reactions which are done in test tubes, and these are called serial dilution methods which are done in test tube. One is the Vidal test, which is done for checking typhoid, a confirmation test for typhoid. Another test is called Weil-Felix test, that is for rickettsiasis. So these are two tests which are carried out through serial dilution in test tube. Let us look at the Vidal test, how the Vidal test is carried out in test tube, and the similar way Weil-Felix test is also carried out. We know when someone is getting infected with enterobacteria for typhoid, antibodies will be produced against this bacteria in the body, and the organism which is causing this is Salmonella typhi. Okay, Salmonella typhi is the organism which is causing this typhoid, and Salmonella typhi and Salmonella paratyphi. They have two kinds of antigens. One is the flagellar antigen, which is denoted as H, very potent antigen. Another one is the somatic antigen, which is denoted as O. So these are the two antigens that are present on Salmonella typhi and paratyphi, antigen H and antigen O. Against these antigens, antibodies are produced in the patient. Blood is taken, serum is taken, and then serially dilute. Okay, let us take 4 test tubes. It is serially diluted in normal saline. Assume this is 1:20, this is 1:40, this is 1:80, 1:160, so on and so forth. This way it is serially diluted. Then what we do? This has got antibodies. Antigen for Salmonella, H antigen and O antigens are added to this. So antigen is added. Antigen is added in all the tubes. So antigen is added. Now, at what concentration or at which dilution it gives a precipitation, that shows the gravity of the disease. For example, you are getting a precipitation line, or not precipitation, agglutination. Suppose you are getting an agglutination in 1:160. Even such a very small concentration of antibody, it is able to form a visible agglutination, which shows that the infection is greater. So this is Vidal test which is carried out in order to find out possibility of or presence of H antigen or O antigen which are reflective of typhoid infection. You see how agglutination reactions are carried out in a varieties of ways in order to detect this. All these are direct method of detecting the presence of antigen. Let us see how indirect agglutination test is carried out. Indirect agglutination is also known as passive agglutination reaction. Now, indirect agglutination is carried out when if the antigen is a soluble antigen. Remember, agglutination reactions are carried out for particulate antigen. If the antigen is soluble, now what do? We have to carry out something called a passive agglutination reaction. How is it carried out? What is normally done is we take RBCs, okay, these are the RBCs. Now on the RBC, if the soluble antigen is coated, so if the soluble antigen is linked on the RBCs with the help of chemicals like tannic acid, etc. So this is another RBC. So tannic acid, etc. can help in coating these antigens on RBC molecules. Once now this soluble antigen is coated on a particulate matter, the primary criteria is met. Now we need add antibodies to it. Okay, I will use another pen. We add antibodies to it. Antibody is added. Now the antibody can bind and cross-link and a lattice can be formed. So indirectly, through a passive form, agglutination is promoted. This is known as indirect or passive agglutination reaction. Many times what happens is, especially in the case of certain blood group, this one classic example of passive agglutination is carried out for hepatitis B. So passive agglutination test is carried out in order to detect hepatitis B antigens. Okay, many times what happens is if the antigenic determinant will be buried inside, it is not easily available. If the antigenic determinant is buried for the antibodies to bind, in such cases what is normally done is, assume this is the RBC, okay, so we have coated with the one antigen, soluble antigen, but if the antigenic determinant is buried inside, in such cases an antibody is used. An antibody raised against this antigen is used. So by linking with this antibody, this becomes our particulate antigen. Okay, so let us draw one more. So therefore this is another RBC and this is another soluble antigen attached, and to that you add another antibody is attached. So this becomes the particulate matter. Now what do? We add an antibody raised against another antibody. This we can check from the patient's serum whether a particular antibody is present. So that antibody, if it binds, and it can form a lattice and it can get precipitated. Another variation of agglutination reaction. You can see how different, once you know the basic principle, what all variations that you can introduce in order to suit your requirement, your research. Our discussion about agglutination reaction is incomplete unless we speak a few words about agglutination inhibition. Agglutination inhibition is a variation of agglutination reaction in order to find the presence or the absence of a particular antigen. A classic example is in detection of drugs. For example, let us assume that cocaine. We want to find out whether a person has consumed cocaine or not. What is normally done is, in this case, RBCs are taken. RBCs are coated with the cocaine. That is first part. Now at the same time, what else is done is urine sample from a suspect is taken. So urine is taken and this urine sample is incubated with the antibodies raised against cocaine. So therefore these are the antibodies against cocaine. So what will happen when you add antibodies raised against cocaine with the urine? All the antibodies will bind to the available cocaine which is present in the urine. No antigenic determinants or the cocaine cannot be detected now. Now this sample is added to this, that is to RBC coated with cocaine, because all the antibodies have been used up. Now antibodies are not able to bind with the cocaine which is coated on the surface of RBC. What will be the net effect? No agglutination happens. So inhibition of this agglutination is one of the ways by which in the presence or the absence of an antigen can be detected. Similar technique is used for detecting infection of rubella. So it has got very many applications in the inhibition of agglutination. This is another aspect of agglutination reaction.